Morning. Thank you so much. Hey, I'd love to see a show of hands really quick. How many of you brought your hands this morning? What? That lady in the back forgot her hand. Okay, I was just making sure you're awake. Quick poll of the room. Has anybody here taken an Uber or Lyft ride? Oh gosh, look at all the hands that went up. Just about everybody. Who stayed at an Airbnb? Anybody? Okay, about half of the room. Has anybody crowdfunded anything? Oh, just about a third of the room. So if you raised your hand, you have participated in the collaborative economy, and you're probably wondering what that means to your business. I'd first like to thank my speaker bureau, APB, for making this speech possible. Thank you so much. Now, let's talk about what this collaborative economy means to us as business folks. But to set the stage, let me start with some stats on the size of this market. 10-year-old Etsy had 19 million active shoppers, but they don't own a single factory, warehouse, or showroom. They had an IPO for north of $3 billion. 8-year-old Lending Club, where people get loans from each other rather than a bank, is worth $7 billion, and they don't own a single bank, branch, or ATM. Next is Airbnb, and we'll hear from Chip pretty soon. They had, I think this is way out of date, 23 million guests. They don't own a single bed, bath, or bar, and they're now worth $25 billion, which is larger than most hotel chains. 6-year-old Ubers had 140 million rides. They don't own a single taxi car or a town car, and they're valued at $50 billion as of Friday. Now, PricewaterhouseCoopers says that the revenue from this collaborative sharing industry is now at $15 billion, but in just a few years, it'll be $335 billion. Wow! What does that mean? Well, these are young startups. They're asset light. They don't own things. Very high transaction, and they're worth a lot of money. This, in my opinion, is often the opposite of established companies. And it poses this very damning question, the question I'm going to ask and answer today: what role do established companies play when people get what they need from each other? Now, to answer that question, I'm going to take us on a tour. We're going to take a tour of a honeycomb. And a honeycomb is a wonderful geometric structure that nature has selected for a bunch of organisms working together. Honeycombs are both resilient, they can take a lot of weight, and they're also very efficient. There's no wasted space between any of the hexes. And inside of this honeycomb, right in the center, is a new type of person. We call these the empowered people. Whatever you do, don't call them consumers. They're not consumers. They're turning their homes into hotels. They're turning their cars into taxis. They're crowdfunding each other, and they're making their own goods in the maker movement. These are empowered people. It's a very different behavior set that we haven't seen for a few hundred years. Now, let's explore 6 industries that might be important to the meeting professional: goods, food, services, space, transportation, and money, and see how these peer-to-peer industries are evolving. And then also, I'll show you what large companies are doing to respond. So I'll show you both the startups and what you could translate into your business model to make a difference. First, let's take a look at the physical goods space. Instead of people buying goods from traditional retailers, the maker movement is alive and growing. If you've been to a maker fair, you've seen thousands of makers that are training each other, selling their wares and goods, and bonding a community of people that create their own goods instead of buy them. Now, we're seeing big established companies make some changes too. Take, for example, Hasbro. Hasbro observed that there's a group of makers 3D printing and scanning their own toys out on a site called Shapeways, and they were not doing it with permission. Well, they had one of two choices: shut it down with a cease and desist, but instead, they chose the other route. They decided to partner with these makers, and they gave them the official 3D printing files and said, you can print out our toys, but we get a revenue cut from every single print. A crowd and a company working together. Now let's take a look at the food space. There's certainly been, we're going to hear from Book a Local in just a few minutes on some of the interesting models that are emerging, but what I wanted to talk about is the on-demand food industry that's quickly rising here around San Francisco and beyond. There are some hotels in this area that have actually stopped, in this neighborhood, that have stopped room service. It's very expensive, and it's more efficient now for people to book food on these different apps. Take, for example, Sprig. Within 15 minutes, you can get a locally sourced hot meal for around $9. Wow, big changes in the food industry. So what are big companies doing in response? One of the companies I work with is Whole Foods. They saw a bunch of couriers running through their stores, picking up items and delivering them to people's homes, and that's called Instacart. And they decided to partner with Instacart, and they allow them to see the inventory in their stores, and they even have a dedicated space in the front of the stores where the Instacart refrigerators can actually store those products. Whole Foods partner with the crowd for that 1-hour delivery, completely changing their value promise to be a very different experience to that final mile. Now let's take a look at services. We're all in the services industry, and we're seeing some new startups like Localier emerge, where locals can actually act like tour guides and recommend where people can go and visit during their tourist or their hospitality visit. And this is very different than hiring a traditional tour guide. It's from locals, and there's a lot of variations of this all around the globe. For those in the audiovisual space, I used to be an AV in college. And check out Media Mobs, which is an online platform for video producers, editors, and film crews, kind of like a marketplace for them to find other folks to work with. It's a platform for AV folks to find the right conferences to work with. Media Mobs. Now let's talk about what a big company is doing to make these changes. Swisscom, one of the largest telecom companies in Europe, they partnered with a startup that enables the crowd to actually service folks in their own homes. And this program is called Swisscom Friends, powered by a startup called Mila. And the way it works is this: Swisscom realizes that some of their customers have complicated AV setups in their homes. They've got an iPad, they've got an Xbox, they've got Microsoft, they've got Apple. And rather than their own support teams fixing that, they ask the crowd to self-service each other. So an IT expert in a neighborhood will go over to a neighbor's home and service them for some money. Swisscom Friends. Big companies have a play as well. Now let's take a look at the transportation space. Uber is the big player in this space. They're worth $50 billion. And the CEOs of these companies want to make car ownership down to about 0%. Why own a car when you can get a ride on demand? This company has shifted into retail delivery, cargo delivery, and food. They're expanding into many things related to logistics, not just disrupting taxis. So what are established companies doing? BMW, a company I work with, produced a new program called Drive Now, where you can rent a BMW from special lots. There's around 8 cities in the United States, London, and in Germany, and instead of owning a 1 Series electric car, you can now access this car as part of a membership program. BMW is turning into a car rental service, mobility on demand business model. This is a big departure from selling vehicles for ownership. Now let's talk about physical space. This not only includes business space, but home space as well. So certainly those in the hospitality and meeting space industry need to pay attention. Airbnb, we are all familiar with, offers person-to-person home sharing for that local experience, but it's not limited to just homes. Check out Peerspace. Peerspace is for meeting professionals to find unique, cool, hip, and local places to rent. You can rent a recording studio for an event. You can rent an interesting loft designed for a workshop. You can find all kinds of interesting spaces that are off the grid traditionally, and it's very different than a standardized business center at a hotel. Even big companies are moving in on this space. Hyatt recently invested in One Fine Stay, which is luxury home rentals. I think the price is around $400 to $600 a night on average. And they partnered with them also, where guests who are staying at these localized One Fine Stay properties can now also use the lobbies of certain Hyatt Regencies. So you can see how big companies are partnering with the crowd to unlock new value propositions. And I have a prediction too in the hotel industry. Expect to see a very savvy hotel company in the future decide that they want to partner with the locals in a market, and they will say, in addition or instead of posting your property on any of these sites like Airbnb or Couchsurfing or One Fine Stay, list them on our own hotel website. And we will give you access to our supply chain of bedding, cleaning services, and we will make sure that you have access to our membership guests with the actual records who are not likely to trash your place, our reserved loyalty members. In exchange, those who are visiting, you might stay at a hotel that could be Marriott, W, or Hyatt certified and have that common understanding of a quality of service. And of course, this hotel could get at least 10% transaction cost plus the upsell that they never would have gotten in the first place. Expect to see a savvy hotel company launch their own marketplace for peer-to-peer.